Okay, it was the hearing before the industrial commissions, reports of industrial commissions of South Carolina, reports on the colored population. Crimes of all sorts of increase alarmingly when unpunished. Negro jurors who sat in every case that was tried refused in face of most overwhelming offenses. The city authorities and police of some places included that the city in which I live, because of the laughing stock, became a laughing stock to law because of the objects of contempt to all good citizens. Eastern North Carolina became a Negro paradise, and a immigration to its begin from all quarters. Idle, drunken Negroes infested the streets of Wilmington day and night and grew more and more insolent and aggressive. Ladies were frequently and grossly assaulted, and citizens assaulted. No arrest followed. A Negro newspaper was established and crowned. A series of another elections was pending, and a threat of demand and still a larger share of offices were made. The election was one of the quickest ever held in the state. Of their former white allies deserted them because of their conduct, and the party was beaten. Then, and not until then, the white people asserted that the supremacy in the unmistakably way that they intended to preserve it all hazards forever. It was not to work. It was not the work of a ignorant enemy of the Negroes, but a long delayed and spontaneous action of all white people united in a common purpose of preserving their civilization. Of course, there was a misinterpretation of these facts. The large Negro population on the coast of South Carolina is quite different from this here described. The mayor of Bedford says that the town is remarkable for quiet and good order. For 20 years past, not a single individual has been killed or seriously injured in the disturbance within the corporate limits. See Handbook of South Carolina, page 663. That it is a statement of the mayor of Bedford. Bedford is perhaps the blackest spot in the whole South. That is to say, the Negro population predominates more than anywhere else. There is a peculiar historical fact concerning with the town that I would like to mention to the commission. That the place where the federal troops first set their Negro tree is done on the islands in the neighborhood of Bedford, and they are now there in predominant race, and the mayor refers to them as a quiet community. A most peculiar thing is cofiquetichi in the book on the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. He is a high authority, and he has said that the Yamasee Indians were Negroes, what were known afterwards as the fiercest of the Indian tribes of South Carolina, and well-known Yamasee Indians were African. Yeah, you see, that's how they ended up written out of history. Okay, by Mr. Phillips. In fact, that they were much darker than the other Indians. Yes, this is a fact. And their hair was different too. It is so stated by one of the most distinguished ethnologists in the world. Another corroborative proof is that the Spaniards from that first Negro was equal to 10 Indians. One Negro was equal to 10 Indians for work, and that they were imported these Indian Negroes and carried them to the West Indies to experiment with. So they took Yamasees that they had found here that were pre-Columbian, that they say were able to work 10 to 1 average Spaniard over to the islands to experiment with work and labor and breeding a brand new workforce.
539. History _ Edgefield _ Blankets and plunder. They avoided 96 and did not stop running until they reached the Cherokee towns. We find that 1 year later, May 7, 1751, Mrs. Mary Gould, called by History of Edgefield, 7. D. Captain John Fairchild, Mrs. Cloud, living on Little Saluda River, was severely wounded by 2 Savannah Indians, who killed her husband and children and a young man who was sleeping on the floor. These murders were committed treacherously, the savages having entered the house in a peaceable manner and having been kindly entertained by Gould and his wife. Several distressed families in that neighborhood then deserted their homes and retreated down the country to the congeries to avoid the Indians. In August of the same year, Captain Fairchild informed the governor, James Glenn, that he had ranged with his company as high up as 96, and had built near that place a fort of puncheon logs for the protection of the people of that settlement. That fort was built on the north banks of Johns Creek, where a flourishing civilized settlement was founded contemporaneous with the first ever planted in any part of 96 district. In May 1751, Captain Francis of 96 urged upon Governor Glenn to take into consideration the dangers to which the people there and on the Saluda were exposed from the incursions of the northern Indians and the French. In July of the same year, Captain Francis again wrote to the governor, urging the necessity of building a fort, and of sending up a company of rangers for the protection of the people. The fort was built in August by Captain Fairchild. At this time, the Indians were committing considerable 1749, soon after the first permanent settlements were made in the district, to the close of Colonel Grant's campaign in 1761. There was not a family in all this part of Carolina that was not exposed to serious danger from the inroads and attacks of the savages. In the summer of
Yamacraw. There is a Georgia colonist found 3 years later, and the relations between the two peoples were most amicable. The name Yamacraw was probably derived from the Florida mission's Nombre de Dios de Marisque, where some of the Yamasee once lived. Ultimately, the Yamacraw are believed to have retired among the Creeks. And the Creeks ain't nothing but the split of the Yamasee, as we always keep going over. Ultimately, the Yamacraw are believed to have retired along the creek and later may have gone to Florida. The population, it is impossible to separate distinctly the true Yamasee from the xuala. So now again, we cannot separate the Gule, the Gullah, or the Yamasee from each other. The Mooney gives an estimate of 2,000 in 1650, probably too low. A mission list compiled by Governor Salazar in Florida in 1675 gives 1,190 Yamasee and Tama. In 1708, the two tribes under the name Yamasee were thought to have 500 men capable of bearing arms. In 1715, a rather careful census gives 413 men, a total population of 1,215. This dates from 1726 and 1728 and give 313 and 114 respectively in the missions about St. Augustine. A fairly satisfactory Spanish census taken in 1753 indicates that there were then in the neighborhood of St. Augustine more than 360 Yamasee Indians of xuala. This does not include the Yamasee near Pensacola and Mobile, those in the Creek Nation of Yamacraw. In 1761, a body of Yamasee containing 20 men were living near St. Augustine, but by the time the tribe had probably scattered widely in 1821, the Yamasee of Chattahoochee River numbered 20. The Yamasee of the Chattahoochee River numbered 20 souls, connection in which they have become noted. The Yamasee are famous, particularly on account of the Yamasee War, which marked an epoch in Indian and white history in the Southeast. And at the end of the 17th century, a certain stroke was used in paddling canoes along the coast of Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida, which was called the Yamasee Stroke. A small town in Bedford County, South Carolina, is called Yamasee, a variation of the name. Alright, we'll be back. Today, Friday, May 21st, 1540. In the morning, under a full moon, as Fernando de Soto habit of doing when taking new regions, they went to xuala, Tehran. So once you look at Tehran or Xuala, North Carolina, which is a town on a plain between some rivers, the Pasialat River and the Vaughan River. Its chief was so well provisioned that he gave to the Christians however much they asked for: tamiz or slaves, corn, little dogs or possums, pegues, baskets, and however much he had in that xuala. It seemed to them that there was a better disposition to look on the gold mines than all they had passed through and seen. The mountains view is spectacular from Tehran, or the Cherokee place named xuala, spelled saluda by the English, means the bushy place, or the place where the bushy people live. We view from the mountains above Tehran, the foothills below appear to be bushy. They are covered with very bushy shrubs, unlike the tall mountain spruce and the fir trees. This village was situated in the foothills of the mountain range and in the banks of the river, the North Pachulo, that grew not very large and had a very strong curve coming off the mountains. So what we had in this area, in the South Carolina forces, were particularly ruthless. But those Indians located closest to Charlestown, the Congaree, the Santee, the Sioux, the Pegues, the Wakamassaws, suffered devastating losses. So after the Wakamassaw and the Pegues, we have a whole bunch of slavery in the area. Over the next 2 years, the British and their allies continued to attack the Yamasee, driving them out of the region. Many of the survivors fled to Florida and north to join the Catawba Confederacy. So I have to show y'all who the Catawba Confederacy is. It'd be like the Cherokees, a couple of the northern tribes. Those who fled to North Florida once again became allied with the Spanish. Jerry Keene, in the book Encyclopedia of the American Indian Wars, 1492 to 1890, reports, so through the Craven's pursuit, the Yamasee almost ceased to exist as a tribal entity thereafter. What had been the Yamasee territory now became part of James Oglethorpe's new colony of Georgia. The Yamasee War officially ended in 1718. So this is about, what we're going to say, about 60 years before the American Revolution and about 60 years before the first census, with a peace accord between the British colonists and the Indian nations. As a result of this war, many colonists began to question the wisdom. William and Janie Powe married Peter Hart Jr. in 1800. Nash County had the children with William H. Mathis, Elizabeth Beth, the unknown son, John and Mary and Polly.
Mexicans, and in order to hold on to what he had taken and subdued of the timid ones, he found it necessary to kill or drive these warlike tribes from the country, which with the great advantage of firearms, he succeeded in doing. The Muskogees and their confederates crossed the Mississippi River and called a halt at Baton Rouge, which is known to this day as Red Stick or Club. The Niches, from the river which bears their name in Texas, crossed the Mississippi River and settled where the city of Natchez is now. The Choctaws settled the country on Yazoo, Pearl, Leaf, Chickasaw, and as far as the Tombiba rivers. The Chickasaws set Tillett at Chickasaw Bluff or Memphis. The Creeks, after a short stay at Baton Rouge, moved and settled on the Alabama and its tributaries, the Black Warrior and the Chattahoochee and Flint rivers, and, in time, went as far east as the Oconee River, but never went farther in that direction, and did not make any settlement on the Oconee until after the whites began to encroach on the Indians of that country from the east. The Indians that originally inhabited from the middle parts of the Carolinas, particularly South Carolina, and Georgia to the seaboard, were known as Yamacraws or Yamasees, Oconees, Ogeeches, and Sowanokes or people of the glades. The Sewanokes are known as the Shawnees. The other Indians know them by no other name to this day but Sowanoke, and the Savannah River was known as Sowanoke. Like, comment, tam, tam. Destruction of several missions, and the capture of more than 1,000 Indians, some free, some slave. Nearly all the Appalachi were distributed as slaves among the Carolina settlers. The enslavement of Indians, indeed, was carried on wholesale. A letter to the proprietors, July 10, 1708, states that the garrison of St. Augustine is by this war reduced to the bare walls, their cattle and Indian towns all consumed, either by us in our invasion of that place, or by our Indian subjects. They have driven the Floridians to the islands of the Cape, have brought in and sold many hundred of them, and maybe now continue that trade, so that in some 5 years, they'll reduce the barbarians to a fearless numb beer. In 1708, Colonel Barnwell of South Carolina made an expedition to the Appalachian province of Florida. It is thought that this was the time when Captain Nairn of page 120 of 352.
Here we have from Chahar, Georgia to Cheraw, South Carolina. Two of the tribal names in the old Indian path. Also, I can't remember what highway it is, but it's also known as I-20 East, I think. So yeah, it's I-20 East, and that is an old Indian trail. There are some real Lulus. For the example, the Tamasi, a common Creek village name, is defined on the official website in the state of South Carolina and Wikipedia as a Cherokee word. Because you know the Cherokee, you're going to find out later on in this how the Yamasee, the Wakanasa, everybody from that xuala confederation ended up slaves of the Cherokee. How the Cherokee took in everybody and then turned around and flipped the paperwork on them. This is the province of Tama was the southeastern Georgia. One of the villages named Tamasi, located on the extreme northwest corner of South Carolina, joined the Cherokee Alliance. The other villages named Tennessee in the South Carolina joined the Creek Confederacy. The lower Cherokees had a maximum of 1,200 people. Ain't that about a reoccurring number, 1,200 to 1,100 people? But the American Revolution were almost extinct. They occupied a minuscule area of the state, but South Carolina histories would have you believe that their numbers were a legion and covered over half.